Mad Monk Urouge is the final worst generation member to explore, and Eiichiro Oda has saved the best for last. As a sky citizen, Urouge has the answers to the great mysteries of the world, and in fact, all this time, he's had a huge head start on us, with his ambition potentially directly tying into the dawn of the world and the discovery of the hidden earth below, or as the sky people refer to it, the discovery of endless Verth. This video was inspired by Daksake, who made a great video about the Urouge Enel connection, as well as their potential future on Elbaf. However, I have come to a very different conclusion. And I think that recent revelations have made Urouge's ambition and future in the story quite clear. Because while Eiichiro Oda never had real plans to explore any of the supernovas when he first created them, they have been masterfully weaved into the narrative, and just like I said before, we have saved the best for last. So at face value, Urouge has all of the makings of a potential antagonist, starting with his crew, the fallen monk pirates. Now this could be quite literal due to falling from the sky down to the blue sea. However, generally this sort of terminology is used to indicate a loss of and or rejection of faith. The faith of the sky people being the sun god as well as other assorted gods over there. During Nolan's flashback, we discover that the Skypians hundreds of years ago worshipped at least 4 gods: rain, forest, earth, and most importantly, the sun god, who is specifically mentioned by Moose as the one she's going to be sacrificed for and gets to go and visit. Lucky her. Now something has clearly gone a little bit awry here over time with the human sacrifices and such. The concept of Nika has probably been a bit diluted, but also it's important to note that Urouge is not from Shandia or Skypiea. He's from a different island that we'll get to in a bit. But that different island has a much stronger connection to Nika. At this point, the point is that, as presented to us, Urouge has fallen and may have lost his faith in the sun god. And the fallen nature is also quite evident in Urouge's flagship, the Hanjimaru, the figurehead of which is a colossal Oni face with wings and a large monk bead necklace, almost as if it's designed to represent the true nature of Urouge under the mask that is his perpetual smile, hiding a more sinister demonic presence. Very anti-faith. And broken faith is an idea that persists quite strongly with Urouge, and you can see it most evidently with his encounters with other beings that claim to be gods. Urouge is the first worst generation member to have the unfortunality of crossing paths with St. Charles on Sabari. And I think it's quite clever on the part of Oda to use Urouge in this way, as what we have here is a man of faith coming into contact with a man who claims the authority of a god. And in the face of a man who claims to be a god, a heretic if you will, Urouge saw this and told his crew, parading like that through this lawless land is cause for trouble. We'll just have to kneel and let them pass. And that's a difficult idea to come to terms with. A man of such strong faith willingly kneeling before another man sort of thing claiming to be a god. Furthermore, St. Charles proceeds to shoot a dude and abducts his fiancée into a lifetime of sexual slavery. Urouge just stands there smiling and saying, well, they do as they please. Basically accepting the authority of a world noble, and acknowledging that said authority trumps his beliefs or lack thereof. Meanwhile, Zoro was the one who attempted to take action against St. Charles, a disciple of Luffy, the sun god, and this is perhaps a green-headed sign from the heavens that Urouge maybe should plonk himself back on the right path. It's just there, you can see it, go walk on it. And Zoro is a disciple whose life was saved by Jewelry Bonnie, another devout follower of Nika. It's very interesting that it was those 3 who were chosen to confront a god, because as a result we get to see all 3 of their faiths in action. Zoro, who completely rejects the concept of gods, being the one arguably on the most correct path, then Bonnie, who has faith in Nika conspiring with fate to save Zoro, and then on the side over there is Urouge doing nothing. And to explain this lack of action, we need to dive into Urouge's connection with Enel. It's heavily speculated that Urouge is Birkin, and this is due to his wing shape, because there are 3 tribes of sky people that we currently know of: the Shandians, the Skypians, and the Birkans, with Urouge's wings matching the 3rd one. And Birka also happens to be the island where Enel was born, and the one that subsequently got destroyed by him 8 years ago. The reason why it was destroyed is because the Birkans did not accept Enel as a god. The Birkans believed unwaveringly in their OG deity, which was likely the sun god Nika. And McKinley during Skypiea states that Birka had a quote powerful sky knight that was no match for Enel, which may very well have been Mad Monk Urouge, who was defeated by Enel and cast down to the blue sea, thus becoming a literal fallen monk. And Enel may be one of the few people capable of actually defeating Urouge in battle combat, because due to his devil fruit abilities, in order to bring down Urouge, you need to take him down ideally in a single hit. Otherwise, Urouge will simply absorb the damage and dish it back out as part of his karmic punishment technique. And even pre-time skip, defeating Urouge Urouge in one hit was practically impossible to accomplish. It took a kick from a Marine Admiral to put Urouge into blissful pain sleep, and Enel is capable of one-shotting most pre-time skip characters who aren't made of rubber. Which makes things very interesting when Urouge ends up outside of Raijin Island in the New World, and for the first time to this point, he stops smiling. Potentially because he is all too aware of the power of lightning, and instead he meets an elderly woman named Casa, who offers him an umbrella. And I only point this out because her name Casa literally means umbrella. So Urouge is being offered an umbrella by an umbrella. She also reminds me a lot of Amazon, who the Straw Hats met on the way to Skypiea, and not in a good way because I'm very wary of hospitable old women in One Piece, because they generally have a plan to extort you of all of your cash monies. But this adds to the element of broken faith. Urouge on Burka may have fought for his beliefs, and he lost. The Sun God didn't step in to save Burka or bless Urouge with the power to do so himself, and so Urouge was left with no option but to respect the power of lightning because it trumped his beliefs, as well as respect the power of the world nobles on Sabadi because Urouge had learned a lesson about standing up to those who claim to be gods. The lesson being that whether they are gods or not, they often have the horrifying power to back that claim up. And so Urouge's views may have changed quite radically, and even led him in the direction of the direct antithesis of Nika, being one nefarious Blackbeard. Curiously, Urouge has mentioned Blackbeard once in the past in relation to the outcome of the Paramount War. The key here is Blackbeard. He's going to be the eye of the storm for some time to come. So this is either very precise language or an incredibly coincidentally perfect metaphor from Urouge, because the Will of D are traditionally associated with storms in One Piece and causing storms. And while everyone else is now aware of Blackbeard at this point, Urouge seems to be pretty much the only person in the world other than Shanks who truly sees Blackbeard for the threat he is and the position he holds. And my guess as to why Urouge was able to identify that so early is because he may have secret Will of D knowledge. Whatever it may be, Urouge sees something in Blackbeard, a good thing or a bad thing that he thinks is good. Because if Urouge thinks that the Sun God has forsaken him and doomed his island, then it makes an unfortunate amount of sense to turn to the enemy of the sun, being the darkness. And his epithet Mad Monk adds to this because mad, generally not a good thing, and denotes an individual that you really don't want to spend too much time around. Although epithets are not everything. Thinking about it, Massacre Soldier Killer and Surgeon of Death Trafalgar Law, they turned out to be pretty decent guys after all. But the Mad Monk epithet also immediately conjures thoughts of Rasputin, which doesn't immediately make anyone think, oh, ally. But to be completely fair, that is just the Western perspective. And it's not the one that we should be so keen to cling on to. Because to me, it's far more likely that Urouge's epithet is based on the Chinese Mad Monk Jigong, who is usually described as more of an eccentric drunk who is almost always seen smiling. Much more akin to Luffy's Gear 5th eccentricity. Always doing weird stuff, but for the sake of positive outcomes. And so this is the turning point for Urouge. Because while I do think there are a lot of signs that point to him being a man of broken faith and a strong potential antagonist, I think there is a much better argument to be made for the exact opposite. So first, let's redefine Burka, because during Enel's cover story, we discover that the ancient moon city he explores was also named Burka, so the Burka that Enel destroyed could more accurately be described as New Burka, the settled location after the Sky People migrated from the moon. And one of the reasons why I'm so insistent on Burka having knowledge of Nika is because this civilization seems to have been powered by the Mother Flame, which is present in the hieroglyphics, as well as within their infrastructure, which Enel substitutes with his electricity. And they left the moon to settle on the blue planet in search of resources, which remains the dream of every Sky person to this very day. There's a part during the Skypiea arc where Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp are exploring the Sky Town, and they come across a curious statue made of Verth, which Conus explains, that's Verth. To the inhabitants of the sky, it's an object of eternal admiration. It's what the entire war in the sky was fought over. Who gets to command that holy part of Jaya Island that got heaved up into the sky? And it was the desire that fueled Enel's terror, because Upper Yard was not enough for him. His dream was to find the legendary Endless Verth, which is also known as Fairy Verth, depending on which translation you read or watch. But they're both technically correct because the kanji for it means endless, but the furigana reading on top of the kanji is the English word fairy. So it's a cross-cultural kanji fun pun. Either way, this was a mythical landmass that Enel dreamt of finding, which is why he built the Arc Maxim to go to the moon, thinking that the Endless Verth could only be in the upper domain of the gods. However, with recent revelations, I think it is beyond likely that the Endless Verth is actually a reference to the One Piece world before it flooded, because that's what the planet would have looked like from the moon to the Sky People people who migrated there. A big ball of endless Verth. And in case anyone hasn't put two and two together by now, Verth is just Earth with a V on the front, so it makes a lot of sense that Endless Verth is referring to the planet itself. And yes, Earth does have a secondary meaning, being in the soil in the land and such, but we probably wouldn't call it Earth if it wasn't on Earth, I think. I mean, for example, if and when we do colonize Mars, do you think we're still going to refer to their land as Earth? Absolutely no way. What we're going to do, we're going to pick up a handful of crap and we're going to call it a pile of Marses. And to bring this back to Urouge, he may actually have a very similar dream to Enel, given that this is the quote, object of eternal admiration to the inhabitants of the sky. So his goal could also be to seek out the legendary Endless Verth, to do the exact same thing as Enel was doing, but Urouge had a different approach, choosing instead to go down and search the blue sea. And they may even have had something of a falling out, because there is a bit of a fun crack theory that Urouge was originally Enel's fifth priest, which is propagated almost entirely by this page, where Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji are sailing into the trials, and it looks like there used to be 5 trial doors, with this door on the left having been destroyed. The idea being that Urouge took a stand against Enel and either refused to accept or even renounced him as a god. And so Enel destroyed any trace of Urouge, obviously including his priest trial door. And while I think this is a fun idea, it is 99.9% not the case, because I believe the trial doors are made to resemble a classic Buddhist palm, like this. So that destroyed door is just a little nub of the thumb popping up. And really, what would Urouge's ordeal be anyway? Given his hobby of love making, it would probably be very similar to Sanji's quote, ordeal of love, which may very well have been most challenging of the 5 for Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji to overcome. But I think there's a very solid chance that Urouge purposely went down to the blue sea to search for the Endless Verth. And it's probably a desire he's had since he was a child, because we do have one image of a very young Urougeling holding a rock, indicating that he may have had a similar desire and or obsession with land to Enel. Because mate, I haven't seen someone this excited about holding a rock since Jonathan Joestar. And searching the blue sea, that is a thought that would never have crossed Enel's mind. Because how could such a holy place exist below him, the holy man? It must be above, because that is the domain of a god. But Urouge elected to abandon this idea and became a fallen monk, to commit what would look like heresy in the eyes of Enel, and condemning himself to the lowly mortal world. Which also goes on to explain pretty much everything Urouge has done on the blue sea so far. Urouge clearly has his own personal motivations, because one does not simply wander into Totterland and defeat one of Big Mom's sweet commanders without some sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose isn't necessarily wanting to fight or declare war like a Eustace kid or just be a prick in any way. The sense of purpose could be that Urouge just needed to get into Totterland in order to search for the Endless Verth. And when he didn't find it, he retreated to a comfy sky island after defeating Charlotte's Neck. And something that I love about catching up with Urouge on that there sky island is that the narrator says, in a certain sky, as if there's more than one sky, in the same way that there's more than one sea. And it makes me feel like there's a whole world up there that we have barely touched. I mean, for example, this is a location called the Balloon Terminal, a sky island held up entirely by balloons, which I think is an idea that's so stupid that I can't help but absolutely love it. But this is also making me start to think that Urouge may have left Burka before Enel destroyed it in order to pursue these desires, and even potentially follow in the footsteps of Nika by seeking out freedom. Or if Burka had a direct connection to Joy Boy, emulating his pilgrimage by becoming a pirate and pursuing his faith that way. Because there were no answers for Urouge waiting in the sky. At best, what he was given was a false god in the form of Eminem, and this is the way I prefer to think about Urouge. Not so much as a man whose faith has been broken, but as someone who has abandoned the institution of faith and is in pursuit of something more pure, similar to Bartholomew Kuma's belief in Nika. Speaking of, Urouge and Kuma have a startling set of similarities. They're both 47 years old, they both have similar heights and builds, at least in Urouge's bulked up Karma form, and both characters were designed by Oda to tank an unfathomable amount of pain. But this is how I think Urouge ties into the final saga of One Piece. If we're correct and the true dawn of the world is to reduce the flood waters back to pre-Void Century levels and shine glorious light on this land trapped in the darkness, then that is also the solution to Urouge finally discovering the mythical Endless Verth, which makes him a very natural ally, and it might even set up an appearance during Elbaf. Because something else I should note about Burka is that it has very interesting ties to Viking culture, given that Burka is the name of Sweden's oldest town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site founded in 750 AD, which served as a very important trading center during the Viking Age. It is admittedly a loose tie to Elbaf, but I really wouldn't be surprised if this arc incorporated Urouge. The large Yggdrasil-like tree almost certainly extends to the height of Sky Islands at least, with both civilizations having a connection to Nika, so Urouge could fit shockingly well into Elbaf. And really, this is probably the last arc of substance before the final war, and Urouge is the last Worst Generation member to cover. And if Eiichiro Oda can pull off tying Urouge into the story, then we will have a full complement of Worst Generation character arcs.